Hit by a millionaire's car, Leah, an unemployed pregnant refugee, found an unexpected love in Paris. What if a simple accident on the streets of Paris brought together two completely different worlds? Could an unexpected encounter change the fate of a woman who has already lost everything? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. In the heart of Paris, the streets were alive with a symphony of sounds and colors. The clatter of high heels against cobblestones mingled with the distant notes of a busker's violin, creating a vibrant urban tapestry. Leah navigated through this bustling environment, her heart heavy with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The beauty of the city, with its charming cafes and iconic architecture, felt like a cruel joke to her. She was a refugee, a woman far from home, carrying the weight of her unborn child within her. Each step she took was accompanied by the sharp reminders of her precarious situation, the fear of unemployment, the uncertainty of her future, and the relentless societal judgment she faced. As she walked, her eyes drifted over the faces of passers-by, each person seemingly lost in their own world, too busy to notice the struggles of someone like her. Leah was acutely aware of her outsider status. The elegant coats and designer handbags contrasted starkly with her simple, worn clothing. She had once dreamed of a life filled with stability and love, but now, all that seemed like a distant memory. She paused briefly to catch her reflection in a shop window, the soft glow of her skin contrasting with the dark circles under her eyes. The reflection of a woman on the brink of motherhood stared back at her, and in that moment, she felt a surge of determination. She had to keep moving, for the sake of her child, for the hope of a better life. Her thoughts spiraled as she continued down the street, overwhelmed by the weight of her circumstances. Leah's mind raced with worries about her dwindling finances. The small savings she had were quickly evaporating, consumed by the costs of living in a city that thrived on luxury. She had applied for countless jobs, but each rejection chipped away at her already fragile self-esteem. The pregnancy had added another layer of complexity to her situation. Employers were hesitant to hire someone who would soon need maternity leave, and Leah was left feeling like a burden in a world that valued productivity above all else. With every step, she felt the familiar pang of despair. The shadows of her past haunted her. The war that had torn her family apart, the harrowing journey to seek asylum in a foreign land, and the loss of her home. Paris, with all its romantic allure, had become a labyrinth of loneliness and fear. Yet, as she watched the laughter of children playing in a nearby park, a flicker of hope ignited within her. She envisioned a future for her child, one filled with laughter, love, and a sense of belonging. It was that vision that propelled her forward, even as doubt threatened to take hold. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian sat in his lavish office overlooking the Seine, surrounded by the trappings of success. The sleek design of his workspace, adorned with expensive art and polished furniture, reflected his achievements as a businessman. He was a man molded by expectations, shaped by the legacy of his wealthy family. Yet, despite the accolades and financial security, Julian felt an emptiness gnawing at him. The relentless pace of his work had become a suffocating routine, and the thrill of each deal had long since faded into monotony. He stared at the spreadsheets on his computer screen, numbers blurring together as his mind wandered. The pressure to maintain his family's status weighed heavily on him. Every decision felt scrutinized, every misstep potentially leading to ruin. Julian had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in the eyes of his parents. Yet, beneath that polished surface lay a profound sense of isolation. His relationships felt transactional, built on expectations rather than genuine connection. He longed for something more, a purpose, a passion, a love that transcended the material world he inhabited. As he gazed out the window, the vibrant life of Paris unfolded before him, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of his office. He yearned to be part of that life, to experience the world beyond the confines of his corporate bubble. The laughter of people below, the aroma of fresh pastries wafting in from nearby bakeries, and the warmth of the sun on his skin felt like distant dreams. Julian often found himself lost in thoughts of what could be, wondering if he could ever break free from the gilded cage that was his life. The collision of their worlds was imminent, though neither Leah nor Julian could have anticipated the profound impact it would have on their lives. As Leah stepped off the curb, her thoughts consumed by worry, her mind became a blur of fears and hopes. In that instant, the chaos of the city converged with her reality. A car approached, sleek and powerful, its driver unaware of the impending encounter. Leah's foot slipped into the street, and time seemed to stretch to an unbearable length. The world around her became a cacophony of sounds, the honking of horns, the distant shouts of pedestrians, and the sudden screech of tires. In a heartbeat, everything changed. The car struck her with a jolt, sending her sprawling onto the pavement. Pain radiated through her body, sharp and overwhelming, as a wave of panic washed over her. The chaos erupted around her. Bystanders rushed forward, their faces a blur of concern and horror. Leah's breath came in ragged gasps as she fought to comprehend what had just happened. She felt a warm trickle of blood on her forehead, the world spinning around her as she struggled to remain conscious. Julian, still reeling from the shock of the accident, emerged from his car, his heart racing with guilt and fear. He had been lost in his thoughts, unaware of the woman who had stepped into the street. As he approached her, the gravity of the situation sank in, and he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The crowd began to gather, their murmurs blending into a dissonant hum that filled his ears. He knelt beside Leah, his hands trembling as he reached out to her, desperation flooding his heart. In that moment of chaos, as Leah lay on the ground, the weight of their separate struggles collided. The vibrant life of Paris, filled with dreams and despair, had brought them together in a way neither could have foreseen. As the sirens approached in the distance, signaling the arrival of help, a connection sparked between them, one born not of circumstance, but of shared humanity. In the midst of pain and fear, a bond began to form, one that would challenge their perceptions and redefine their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope, a sense that perhaps they were meant to find one another in a world that often felt so isolating. As Leah lay on the hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic enveloping her like a heavy blanket, she couldn't shake the tumult of emotions swirling within her. The bright fluorescent lights above were harsh, casting a stark glare that felt almost accusatory. She blinked slowly, her head pounding with the insistent throb of a concussion. The doctor had assured her that her baby was unharmed, yet the relief was tempered by the anger that bubbled beneath the surface. The accident had been a cruel twist of fate, and the man responsible for it was now standing at the foot of her bed, a silent, guilt-ridden shadow. Julian shifted uncomfortably, his tailored suit contrasting sharply with the faded, worn hospital gown that clung to Leah's frail form. He struggled to find the right words, the weight of his guilt pressing heavily on his chest. Here was a woman he barely knew, yet her life had been irrevocably altered by his actions. His mind raced with thoughts of responsibility. His wealth and privilege seemed to mock him in this moment. He had always been someone who thrived on control, yet now he felt utterly powerless, grappling with the consequences of a split-second decision. As Leah's eyes settled on him, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. Despite her anger, she could see the concern etched on Julian's chiseled features. It was a side of him that she hadn't anticipated, an unguarded moment that contrasted sharply with the aloof businessman she had imagined. Julian's brows furrowed as he caught her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, their worlds collided once more, revealing a shared humanity that neither had expected. The room was quiet, save for the beeping of the machines that monitored Leah's vitals. It was an unsettling sound, a reminder of her fragility. Julian took a step closer, the polished floor reflecting the light in a way that seemed to magnify the distance between them. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words faltered. What could he possibly say that would alleviate her pain? How could he bridge the chasm that separated their lives, a chasm formed by privilege and circumstance? Leah turned her head slightly, wincing at the movement. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil she felt. She didn't want to be a pity case, a charity case, but the reality was that she had no choice. Her life as a refugee was marked by struggle, and now she was thrust into a situation that felt like a cruel joke. She remembered the excitement she had felt when she first arrived in Paris, hopeful, eager to build a new life for her child. But now, that hope felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the chaos of her current reality. As the hours slipped by, Leah began to notice the subtle shifts in Julian's demeanor. He was no longer just the man who had hit her. He was someone grappling with his own demons. She watched as he raked a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that spoke volumes. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, a flicker of something deeper that intrigued Leah. It was a moment of connection, a silent acknowledgement that despite the circumstances, they were both navigating uncharted waters. Days passed, and Leah remained in the hospital, her body healing slowly, but her spirit still weighed down by uncertainty. Julian took it upon himself to visit her daily, bringing flowers that wilted almost as quickly as their initial vibrancy. He would sit by her bedside, recounting stories of his childhood, of family vacations filled with laughter and privilege. Yet, beneath the surface, she sensed his struggle with expectations, the burden of a legacy he was not sure he wanted to carry. In those quiet moments, they began to share more than just their immediate circumstances. They peeled back the layers of their lives, revealing the scars that had shaped them. Julian confessed his feelings of isolation, the pressure to conform to his family's ideals, and the emptiness that gnawed at him despite his success. Leah, in turn, spoke of her past, the losses that had led her to flee her home, the dreams that seemed to slip further away with each passing day. Their connection deepened, transcending the barriers of wealth and status. Leah found solace in Julian's vulnerability, a stark contrast to the coldness she had often encountered in her struggles as a refugee. Here was a man who, despite his privilege, was grappling with his own battles. It was a revelation that stirred a sense of camaraderie within her. She was not alone in her suffering. But the undercurrents of their respective realities loomed large. Leah was acutely aware of the precarious balance of power that existed between them. She hesitated to accept Julian's offers of financial assistance, fearing it would create a rift that could never be mended. The last thing she wanted was to be seen as a charity case, a woman who had to rely on the goodwill of a wealthy stranger. Her pride was a fragile thing, and she clung to it tightly, even as her circumstances dictated otherwise. Meanwhile, Julian wrestled with his own demons. The whispers of societal judgment echoed in his mind. What would his family think? What would the world outside these hospital walls say about him? A wealthy businessman involved with a refugee. The stigma weighed heavily on him, yet the burgeoning feelings he had for Leah were impossible to ignore. He felt a magnetic pull toward her resilience, her strength in the face of adversity. It was a kind of beauty he had never encountered, and it terrified him. As Leah continued her recovery, moments of laughter punctuated the tension that had initially filled their encounters. She found herself laughing at Julian's attempts to lighten the mood, his awkward jokes a welcome distraction from the reality of their situation. There were times when she caught glimpses of the man beneath the suit, the man who cared, who was willing to listen, who was willing to share his truth. In those moments, the hospital room transformed from a place of despair into a sanctuary where they could explore the possibility of something more. But the shadows of their pasts loomed large, casting doubt on their burgeoning relationship. Leah's heart raced at the thought of facing the outside world again, unsure of how she would navigate the complexities of her life intertwined with Julian's. And Julian, despite his growing affection for Leah, felt the weight of his family's expectations bearing down upon him, leaving him torn between duty and desire. In the quiet of the hospital, as night fell and the sounds of the city outside faded into a gentle lull, both Leah and Julian found themselves at a crossroads. The connection they had forged was undeniable, yet the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Would they have the courage to confront their fears, to step into the unknown together? Or would the weight of their respective worlds pull them apart, leaving them to grapple with what could have been? As they sat in silence, the room illuminated only by the soft glow of the bedside lamp, a promise lingered in the air. a promise of understanding, of connection, and perhaps of love. The journey ahead would be anything but easy, but in that moment, they both felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit could forge unexpected bonds, illuminating the path toward redemption and new beginnings. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the opulent ballroom, Leah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. The charity event, a glittering affair hosted by the crème de la crème of Parisian society, was an overwhelming spectacle of elegance and wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like fallen stars, their light refracting into 1,000 twinkling reflections on the polished marble floors. Leah stood beside Julian, her heart racing as she surveyed the room filled with impeccably dressed guests, their laughter and chatter blending into a symphony of privilege that felt foreign to her. Julian, with his tailored suit and confident demeanor, seemed at ease amidst the elite. His presence commanded attention. He was a man accustomed to being recognized, to being admired. He turned to Leah, a gentle smile on his lips, and introduced her as his girlfriend to a circle of guests. The words hung in the air like a delicate thread, binding their two worlds together in that brief moment. Yet, as the whispers began, soft, insidious murmurs exchanged behind elegantly manicured hands, Leah felt herself shrinking, the warmth of his hand on her back turning into a heavy anchor pulling her deeper into her insecurities. She tried to focus on the mission of the evening, a charity raising funds for refugees like herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, a refugee, standing among those who often viewed her kind as a burden rather than a human being. The sophisticated guests, adorned in designer gowns and expensive jewelry, talked of their latest travels and philanthropic endeavors, oblivious to the real struggles that lay outside the gilded walls of their world. Leah's heart ached with the knowledge that many of them would never understand her plight, the fears that gnawed at her every day, nor the sacrifices she had made to arrive at this moment. As the evening progressed, Leah found herself weaving through the crowd, her fingers brushing against the cool fabric of her dress, a simple but elegant creation that Julian had insisted she wear. It was a far cry from the tattered clothes she had grown accustomed to, and for a fleeting moment, she felt beautiful. But as she caught snippets of conversation, her confidence waned. "What is he doing with her?" one woman whispered, her voice laced with disdain. Another chimed in, "He could have anyone in this room." The words felt like daggers, and Leah's breath hitched as she fought against the tide of humiliation threatening to consume her. Julian, sensing her distress, remained by her side, offering quiet reassurances through his gaze. Yet, despite his support, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an intruder in his life. She was acutely aware of the chasm that separated them, a chasm defined by social class, expectations, and the very essence of who they were. Each laugh that rang out around her felt like a reminder of her status, a refugee in a room full of the privileged. As the night wore on and the auction began, Leah's discomfort morphed into a resolve to help Julian. She watched him as he spoke passionately about the cause, his charisma captivating the audience. They raised their paddles, bidding on luxurious items, and Leah felt a flicker of pride for Julian, who was using his influence to make a difference. But her pride was tinged with anxiety. What if they won? What if he was expected to donate far more than he could manage? She felt trapped in her thoughts, torn between supporting him and fearing the judgment of his peers. When the event concluded, the couple stepped outside into the crisp night air. The streets of Paris were alive with the sounds of laughter and the distant hum of traffic. For a moment, the chaos of the charity event faded away, replaced by the intimacy of the evening. Julian reached for her hand, his grip reassuring, and they strolled along the Seine, the moon shimmering on the water's surface like a million tiny diamonds. Yet, the tranquility was short-lived. The moment they returned to his family estate, the reality of their situation crashed down on Julian. In the opulent confines of his home, he faced his mother, who had been waiting for his return. Her expression was a mask of disappointment, her voice laced with criticism as she confronted him about Leah. She insisted that he could do better, that he was destined for someone of his own social standing, someone who could elevate the family's reputation. Julian's heart sank at her words. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with unspoken expectations and the weight of familial obligation. He had always been the obedient son, the one who followed the path laid out for him, but now he felt a growing rebellion within him. He wanted to defend Leah, to proclaim his love for her, but the fear of disappointing his family held him back. In the shadows of the grand staircase, the portraits of his ancestors seemed to watch him, their judgment echoing in his mind. As his mother's voice rose with indignation, Julian felt torn between the two worlds that had collided in his life. His heart ached for Leah, for the woman who had shown him a side of life he had never known, a depth of feeling that transcended the superficiality of his upbringing. But here in this moment, facing his mother's disdain, he felt the shackles of expectation tightening around him. He was a man divided, caught between love and duty, and the struggle left him feeling more alone than ever. Meanwhile, Leah returned to her modest apartment, the weight of the evening pressing heavily on her chest. The laughter and whispers echoed in her mind, a reminder of the barriers that seemed insurmountable. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she wrestled with her own insecurities. Could she really bridge the gap between their worlds? Did she belong in Julian's life, or was she merely a fleeting distraction, an anomaly in his perfect existence? The next day, with thoughts swirling in her mind, Leah made a decision. She couldn't allow herself to be the cause of Julian's anguish, nor could she bear the thought of being the reason for his discontentment. She resolved to push him away, to free him from the burden of their relationship. It was a painful choice, one that shattered her heart, but she believed it was the only way to keep him from the judgment of his family and the whispers of society. As she withdrew from him, Leah felt the chasm between them widen. The laughter and joy they once shared began to fade into a haunting silence. Julian sensed the change in her, the way she began to pull away, and with each passing day, confusion and hurt festered within him. He could feel the distance growing, and with it, the fear that he might lose her. In those moments of solitude, Leah felt the weight of her decision. She yearned for Julian, for the way he made her feel seen, cherished, and loved. But the societal pressures loomed large, and she couldn't shake the belief that he deserved someone who fit seamlessly into his world, someone who wouldn't bring shame or scandal upon him. The love that had blossomed between them now felt like a fragile flower, threatened by the harsh winds of reality, and as the days unfolded, both Leah and Julian found themselves standing on opposite shores, longing for one another yet unable to bridge the divide that had formed. In the heart of Paris, where love stories often thrived against the backdrop of dreams and desires, Leah and Julian faced a crossroads that would test the very foundations of their connection. Each was poised on the brink of a decision that could change everything, and the air crackled with the tension of unspoken words, unresolved feelings, and the haunting question of whether love could truly conquer the barriers that lay between them. Julian sat alone in his lavish apartment overlooking the Seine, the soft glow of the city lights reflecting his turmoil. The weight of Leah's sudden withdrawal from his life felt like a heavy shroud, enveloping him in suffocating darkness. He had always been a man accustomed to control, whether it was in his business dealings or the carefully curated image he presented to the world. Yet, here he was, grappling with a disarray of emotions that he couldn't quite comprehend. The distance she had imposed felt insurmountable, yet he couldn't shake the nagging pull of his heart, urging him to fight for her. He recalled the warmth of her smile, the way her eyes sparkled with determination even in the face of adversity. The memories of their time together flooded his mind, each one a vivid reminder of the connection they had forged amidst the chaos of their lives. He had never felt so alive as when he was with her, but now, he was left with the echo of her absence, a haunting reminder of what could have been. The thought that he might let her slip away filled him with dread. Julian paced around the room, his gaze drifting to the skyline, where the Eiffel Tower stood tall and defiant against the night sky. He had always admired its strength, its ability to withstand the tests of time, but in that moment, it felt like a cruel metaphor for his own life. He was trapped between the expectations of his family and the undeniable pull of his heart toward Leah. Would he ever find the courage to choose love over duty? Days passed, and Leah remained resolute in her decision to keep Julian at arm's length. She often found herself wandering the streets of Paris, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The city, once vibrant and full of promise, now seemed to mock her solitude. The whispers of cafe patrons and the laughter of families echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the life she yearned for but felt impossibly distant. She was pregnant and alone, bearing the weight of uncertainty and fear that gnawed at her insides. One fateful afternoon, as she sat on a bench in a park, the air heavy with the scent of blooming flowers, a letter arrived that shattered her already fragile sense of stability. The envelope, embossed with the insignia of the immigration office, sent her heart racing with dread. With trembling hands, she tore it open, her eyes scanning the words that felt like daggers piercing her hope. Her asylum application had been denied. The world around her blurred as she tried to process the implications of the decision. Panic surged through her veins, the realization sinking in that she could be forced to return to a country that no longer felt like home. The memories of her flight from danger washed over her like a tidal wave, and she felt as if the ground beneath her was crumbling. She was alone in a foreign land, with no one to turn to for support. In that moment of despair, her thoughts flickered to Julian, the man who had once rushed to her side in a moment of crisis, who had shown her kindness in a world that often felt hostile. But she had pushed him away, convinced that he deserved better, that he could not be burdened by her struggles. Now, as the weight of her situation pressed down on her, she felt a deep longing for his presence, the comfort of knowing that she was not alone in this fight. But pride held her captive, and she remained rooted to the bench, the letter crumpled in her hand as tears streamed down her cheeks. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, but for Leah, the light felt dimmed, overshadowed by the shadows of her circumstances. She had always been resilient, a survivor in the face of adversity, but this felt like a battle she was losing. Meanwhile, Julian was restless, his mind consumed by thoughts of Leah. A mutual friend had mentioned her in passing, and the worry that had been gnawing at him intensified. He had to know how she was coping, whether she was safe, if she needed him. The fear of losing her propelled him into action, and he found himself reaching for his coat, determination coursing through him. The streets of Paris were alive with the sounds of laughter and music, but Julian felt like an outsider, an intruder in a world that seemed indifferent to his turmoil. His heart raced as he navigated through the familiar paths, each step bringing him closer to Leah. He knew she was struggling, and the thought of her facing this alone was unbearable. When he finally arrived at the park, he scanned the area frantically, his eyes searching for her familiar figure. The sight of her sitting alone on the bench pierced his heart. She looked so fragile, so lost, her shoulders hunched as if the weight of the world rested upon them. Julian approached cautiously, his breath hitching at the sight of her tears. As he drew closer, he could see the crumpled letter in her hand, the distress etched across her face. His heart ached for her, and he felt an overwhelming urge to wrap her in his arms, to tell her that she wasn't alone. But he hesitated, unsure of how to breach the chasm that had grown between them. Leah sensed his presence before she saw him, a familiar warmth that sent a shiver down her spine. She turned slowly, her heart racing as their eyes met. The tension in the air was palpable, filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Julian's gaze bore into hers, and for a moment, time stood still. She could see the concern etched on his face, the way his brow furrowed as he took in her fragility. It was a stark reminder of the bond they had forged, one that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. But doubt still lingered in her mind. Could she allow him back into her life after she had pushed him away? Julian stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The distance between them felt like a chasm, but he was determined to bridge it. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from hers, a silent invitation for her to let him in. The weight of his presence was comforting, and for the first time in days, Leah felt a flicker of hope. She took a deep breath, the scent of blooming flowers mingling with the warm breeze, and nodded, the unspoken agreement between them igniting a spark of connection. As Julian took her hand, an electric warmth surged through her, a reminder that despite the chaos surrounding them, they still had each other. In that moment, amidst the beauty of Paris, they both realized that love could be a powerful force capable of conquering the darkest of fears. Together, they could face the uncertainties that lay ahead. As they sat side by side, hands intertwined, the world around them faded into the background, leaving only the promise of a shared journey ahead. The night deepened, and the stars began to twinkle overhead, casting a soft glow over the city. Leah could feel Julian's warmth beside her, a beacon of hope that they could navigate the storm together. As they shared their burdens in silence, the bond between them grew stronger, a testament to the resilience of love in the face of adversity. As the days rolled into weeks, Leah and Julian found themselves enveloped in a whirlwind of emotions. They spent countless evenings poring over documents, searching for the right words to articulate Leah's plight in her asylum appeal. The small apartment that had once felt so foreign to Leah now resonated with a sense of purpose and hope. Papers cluttered the dining table, and the soft glow of the lamp illuminated their earnest faces as they collaborated on the intricate details of her case. Leah felt a surge of determination each time she glanced at Julian, his brow furrowed in concentration, his fingers tapping furiously on the keyboard. Despite the heavy burden of her refugee status, she was beginning to realize that she had allies in this fight. Most importantly, Julian. This sense of camaraderie ignited a fire within her, fueling her resolve to not just survive, but to thrive. Yet, lurking beneath the surface was an unshakable tension. The unyielding pressure from Julian's family loomed like a dark cloud over them. Julian's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from his parents, each more demanding than the last. They insisted he abandon his relationship with Leah, warning him of the repercussions, not just for him, but for the family name. It was a constant reminder that their worlds were not only different but at times, dangerously opposed. The more his family pressed, the more Julian felt the weight of their expectations. He had lived his life under the shadow of their ambitions, and now, as he stood on the precipice of a decision, he felt the tremors of doubt creeping in. One evening, Leah noticed Julian's distant gaze as they sifted through yet another stack of documents. She paused, her heart racing, sensing the turmoil brewing beneath his stoic exterior. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm, grounding him in the moment. For a fleeting second, their eyes locked, and she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his expression. But the moment quickly passed, replaced by the familiar tension that accompanied their discussions about his family. Days turned into nights filled with uncertainty, but Leah found solace in a support group she began attending. The group gathered at a small community center, a sanctuary for those like her, refugees seeking guidance and understanding. She was initially hesitant, her heart racing as she entered the room filled with unfamiliar faces. But as the sessions progressed, she began to feel the warmth of shared experiences, the strength and vulnerability. In those meetings, Leah opened up about her journey, her struggles, and her dreams. The others listened intently, offering encouragement and advice, empowering her to find her voice amidst the chaos of her life. They shared stories of resilience, of battles fought and won, and of the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. Leah left each session with a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. As she began to articulate her experiences, she felt a shift within herself. She was reclaiming her narrative, transforming from a victim to a survivor. The realization that she was deserving of a future filled with hope and love stirred something deep within her. She was not just a refugee. She was a woman, a mother-to-be, and she had every right to fight for her dreams. Meanwhile, Julian, inspired by Leah's newfound determination, found himself grappling with his own identity and choices. He watched her blossom with admiration, her strength igniting a passion within him he had long suppressed. Every time she returned from the support group, her eyes sparkled with a newfound certainty, and he felt invigorated by her spirit. He began to question the path laid out for him by his family, the expectations that had dictated his life for far too long. The more Julian learned about Leah's struggles, the more he realized that his love for her was worth fighting for. He needed to stand up not just for her, but for the love they had built together. The thought of losing her to the suffocating expectations of his family made his heart race with panic. He knew it was time to confront them, to declare his love openly, regardless of the consequences. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Paris, Julian made a decision. He would not allow fear to dictate his choices any longer. He invited Leah to join him for dinner with his family, a gesture that held great significance. It was a chance to bridge their worlds, to bring Leah into the sphere he had always known but never felt at home in. The dinner table was set with elegance, the clinking of fine china echoing in the grand dining room. Julian's parents arrived, their sharp gazes assessing the situation as they settled into their seats. Leah, dressed simply yet beautifully, felt the weight of their scrutiny. The air was thick with tension, a silent battle of wills raging beneath the surface. As the conversation flowed, Julian tried to steer it toward lighter topics, but his parents' disapproval simmered just beneath their polite smiles. Leah remained poised, her heart pounding, acutely aware of the judgmental glances directed at her. She could feel Julian's tension, the way his hands clenched around his fork, a silent indication of his struggle. Finally, in a moment that felt both exhilarating and terrifying, Julian took a deep breath. He turned to his parents, his voice steady yet firm, and proclaimed his love for Leah. The room fell silent, the tension palpable as his words hung in the air. He spoke of her resilience, her strength in the face of adversity, and how she had opened his eyes to the beauty of true love. The fallout was immediate. His mother's expression twisted into one of disbelief, while his father's face darkened with anger. They unleashed a torrent of criticism, berating him for his choices, for tarnishing the family name. But Julian stood firm, his heart racing, his conviction unwavering. He had made his choice, and it was clear where his loyalties lay. Leah sat frozen, her heart aching at the sight of Julian standing alone against his family. She felt a mix of pride and fear, knowing that this declaration would change everything for both of them. She longed to reach out, to comfort him, but the weight of the moment held her in place. As tensions escalated, Julian faced the harsh reality of his decision. His family's disapproval echoed in his ears, the threats of disownment and financial ruin looming over him like a storm cloud. Yet, as he glanced at Leah, he felt a surge of hope. They had fought so hard to be together, and he knew that their love could withstand the storm. In that moment, surrounded by the chaos of familial turmoil, Julian understood that love was not just about comfort. It was about standing together, facing the world, and fighting for what truly mattered. Leah was worth every sacrifice, every confrontation with his past. As he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the fallout, he realized that this was just the beginning of their journey. A journey built on love, resilience, and an unwavering belief in their future together. As the day of the appeal hearing dawned, the air in Leah's modest apartment was thick with a mix of anxiety and hope. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns on the worn wooden floor, but it did little to ease the tension that hung between Leah and Julian. They moved around each other in a dance of unspoken fears and shared determination, each preparing in their own way for what lay ahead. Leah was acutely aware of the stakes involved. The prospect of being forced to return to a country where her life would be in jeopardy was an ever-present shadow. She took a deep breath, focusing on the sound of her baby's gentle movements within her, a reminder of what she was fighting for. Julian, meanwhile, was consumed by his own inner turmoil. He dressed meticulously, each button fastened with deliberation, but the effort felt futile against the weight of his impending responsibilities. His family's opinions loomed large in his mind, threatening to unravel the delicate tapestry of his newfound love for Leah. He had chosen to stand by her side, yet the fear of losing everything he had worked for gnawed at him. In the moments of silence, he glanced at Leah, who was adjusting her hair in the mirror, trying to project an air of confidence that she didn't quite feel. He wanted to reach out, to reassure her that together they could weather any storm, but the words caught in his throat. As they left the apartment, the streets of Paris buzzed with life, indifferent to the weight of their hearts. The city, with its blend of history and modernity, felt like a metaphor for their relationship, a beautiful facade hiding the complexities beneath. They walked hand in hand, sharing a quiet moment of solidarity amidst the chaos around them. Leah's mind raced with worries of what the hearing would mean, while Julian's thoughts were consumed with the potential repercussions from his family. Each step felt monumental, as if they were crossing an invisible line that separated their disparate worlds. Upon arriving at the courthouse, the imposing structure loomed over them, a symbol of the justice they sought, but also the power dynamics that could dictate their fate. The cold stone walls felt unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth of their shared moments. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, with other refugees and their advocates filling the waiting area. Leah caught sight of familiar faces, others who had endured similar struggles, and felt a sense of camaraderie. Despite their different backgrounds, they were all united by the common thread of seeking a safe haven. As they waited for their case to be called, Leah and Julian exchanged glances filled with unspoken promises. They had each other, and that was a source of strength. Leah's heart raced as the minutes ticked by, her mind drifting to the life she envisioned for her child, one filled with safety, love, and opportunity. Julian, sensing her anxiety, squeezed her hand gently, grounding her in the moment. They were a team, and today would be a testament to their resilience. The hearing room was stark and formal, the judge's imposing presence adding to the gravity of the situation. Leah took a deep breath as they entered, scanning the faces of those present. Julian positioned himself beside her, his presence a reassuring anchor. As the proceedings began, Leah listened intently to her lawyer's arguments, but her mind often wandered to the life she had left behind. The memories of her homeland, filled with danger and loss, surged within her. She steeled herself, reminding herself that she had fought too hard to let fear dictate her future. Just as the hearing seemed to be veering toward an uncertain conclusion, a familiar figure appeared at the doorway. Leah's heart skipped a beat as she recognized her old friend, Amira, stepping into the room with an air of determination. Amira had been a source of comfort during their shared hardships, and Leah could hardly believe her eyes as she made her way forward. The unexpected appearance of her friend injected a renewed sense of hope into the room. Amira had always been a fierce advocate for those in need, and Leah knew that her presence could change the course of the hearing. When Amira spoke, her voice rang clear and strong, recounting the harrowing experiences they had both faced in their home country. She painted a vivid picture of the dangers Leah had fled, her words a powerful testament to the truth of Leah's situation. The judge listened intently, the gravity of Amira's testimony resonating deeply. Leah felt a swell of gratitude and relief wash over her as Amira's voice filled the room, the weight of their shared history lending credibility to their fight. The tide of the hearing began to shift. Hope flickered in Leah's chest. As the session drew to a close, Leah and Julian exchanged a glance filled with cautious optimism. They were still far from safe, but Amira's intervention had given them a fighting chance. The judge adjourned, promising to render a decision soon, and Leah felt a wave of emotion crash over her. Julian pulled her into a tight embrace, their shared relief palpable. They had navigated a storm together, and for the first time in a long while, the future felt a little brighter. In the aftermath of the hearing, the couple found themselves in a small cafe nearby, seeking solace in the familiar warmth of a steaming cup of coffee. The atmosphere was buzzing with life, yet they remained cocooned in their own world, reflecting on the day's events. Leah's heart was still racing from the adrenaline of the hearing, but now it was mixed with a sense of possibility. Julian sat across from her, his expression a blend of pride and concern, as if he were weighing the ramifications of what had just transpired. As they shared stories and laughter, the door to the cafe swung open, and in walked a tall figure that Leah recognized instantly. Julian's estranged father, a high-ranking official known for his cold demeanor and rigid expectations, entered with an air of authority. Leah felt her heart drop. The man who had once loomed large in Julian's life now stood before them, an uninvited specter from the past. Julian's expression shifted to one of apprehension. Leah held her breath, unsure of what this encounter would bring. To Leah's astonishment, Julian's father approached their table, his demeanor surprisingly calm. He glanced between Leah and Julian, his expression inscrutable. In that moment, a flicker of realization crossed Julian's face, one of recognition and understanding that had perhaps eluded him for years. The tension in the air was palpable as Leah braced herself for the inevitable confrontation. But instead of the anticipated chastisement, Julian's father spoke with unexpected warmth, acknowledging the love his son had for Leah and the injustice she had faced. The revelation was staggering. Leah's heart raced as Julian's father expressed his desire to intervene on their behalf, to provide the support they needed to ensure that Leah would not be deported. The words hung in the air like a lifeline, and Leah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. In that moment, the barriers between past grievances and future possibilities began to crumble. Julian's father, in an act of unexpected redemption, demonstrated that love could indeed transcend societal expectations and prejudices. As the couple embraced, the weight of their struggles began to lift. They had faced tremendous odds, but now the prospect of a future together felt tangible. In the warmth of that cafe, surrounded by the laughter and chatter of life continuing around them, Leah finally allowed herself to dream. She envisioned a life with Julian, one filled with hope, love, and a sense of belonging. The shadows of their pasts were still there, but they no longer felt insurmountable. Together, they could build a new narrative, one where love conquered all obstacles and where the promise of a brighter tomorrow awaited them.